Hello, folks, and thank you for joining me live here on my page, Be Weightless. This is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami. I'm a health coach who helps moms, especially working moms and overworked moms, um, achieve body bliss in just minutes a day. And I'm celebrating National Nutrition Month all this month throughout March. And I've been posting a lot of really good daily factoids about different elements of nutrition. And today I wanted to go live and share with you why and how you can eat healthy without eating meat. Now, I know this is not a very popular opinion because, everyone seems to believe that protein is like the best thing ever for you and that low carb is the only way to lose a significant amount of weight. I would like to share with you in the next 15 minutes or so why those are myths and why I decided to go vegetarian several years ago. And how that helped me to eat healthy and different tips and techniques I use in order to make sure I was eating enough protein while still fulfilling my health goals and my particular objectives. So thank you for joining me. If you are joining me live or watching the replay, just say hi in the comments so I can see who's here. And if you are currently a vegetarian or trying to reduce your meat consumption, please comment as well with that, because I want to identify those who could have some tips and tricks to share with us that I may not have access to or I may not be aware of. So I'd love to have us share in this community our best nutrition tips on how to eat healthy without eating meat. So first of all, let's talk about why go vegetarian? And there are different reasons why you can go vegetarian. I did not go vegetarian for ethical reasons because, I love animals. I'm a pet owner. I have a dog. I've loved horses my whole life. I love wild animals. Zoos kind of make me a little upset and sad because they don't treat the animals well and that sort of thing. Hi, thanks for joining us live. Make sure to say hi. I did not go vegetarian for ethical reasons, and I'm well aware of the various resources out there from PETA, which is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. So I'm aware of some of the abuses in the animal industry, but that is not the reason why I chose to go vegetarian several years ago. And so for me, it was more of a health-based decision. Let's talk about that for a few seconds. Why do we have Meatless Monday? Why should we avoid eating meat? And why is that a healthier choice? Well, there was a very popular study called the China study. I just said China like Trump does. Oh my gosh, I should shut my mouth right now. That's embarrassing. But this China study revealed that people who eat a plant-based diet tend to live healthier than those who eat meat. And being the concerned citizen I was, and someone who had already lost 100 pounds, for the purposes of living a long and healthy life, I realized, and I read the study, and I read some of the research around the study, and I said, oh, well, I will get to live an even longer and even healthier life if I stop eating meat. So, one of the challenges for me was I grew up eating meat, and my brother-in-law actually was vegetarian when my sister started dating him, and my family would not let him hear the end of it. I mean, we teased and tormented this poor guy because when we had a cookout or a barbecue at our house, he would bring over his Boca burgers. And if any of you have ever tried Boca burgers, they taste pretty gross, and God knows what's in those things. So we'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of how you eat healthy as a vegetarian, and Boca is not necessarily the answer. But, I came from a family and a culture, if you will, that does not look at vegetarianism as a good thing necessarily. So there was some social pressure and those sorts of things, and my family was like, what? You're not going to eat meat? Why? Especially because my mom is gluten-free, so she eats a lot of meat and vegetables and fruits and that sort of thing, which is also a healthy diet. We're not going to get into the differences between, gluten-free paleo / versus plant-based. We're talking about plant-based and the fact that there is research and studies out there, scientifically done, that do show people who eat less meat, whether that's going completely vegetarian or not, do live longer and have healthier lives. Why is that? Well, for one thing, as you've seen on my page throughout the course of this week, we're talking about whole grains and legumes. So people who tend to avoid meat look for protein from other sources, and they also tend to eat a lot of whole grains. I'm not talking Wonder white bread or, plain white rice or pastas or that sort of thing. People who don't eat meat tend to eat more vegetables. Green vegetables tend to eat more beans, like navy beans, fava beans, cannellini beans, chickpeas. Those are a regular part of a vegetarian's diet. Incidentally, that's one of the reasons why I was okay being vegetarian and why I will never go paleo, because paleo doesn't allow you to eat legumes and beans. And as a Hispanic woman who once traveled across the entire city in Germany that I was living in just to find a can of refried beans, beans are in my blood, and it's a regular part of who I am, and it's a passion of mine. I literally cannot go a week without eating some form of bean. Some days I'll eat multiple forms of bean, whether it's roasted beans, bean cakes, bean burgers, refried beans. I eat lentils through the form of dal. My husband is Indian. I eat beans constantly. So not eating beans is like torture for me. So it was a natural progression for me to go vegetarian. So that was reason number one why vegetarians tend to live longer than people who eat meat, is because they eat more whole grains and they eat more legumes, which are a healthy source of protein. Plant-based protein. Why else do vegetarians live a long time? I don't know too much behind the science behind this, but I'm sure you've heard that the animal industry is not corrupt, but in order to keep producing the amount of meat that us Americans are requiring from the food system, a lot of these animals are being pumped full of hormones and chemicals and fillers, for lack of a better word. So there's a lot of stuff put into our meat sources, unless you go very like wild game and that sort of thing, like elk and venison and that sort of thing. They're not pumped full of anything because they're eating foods that are found in nature. But the majority of us are eating beef and pork and chicken and those sorts of things. And in order to keep up with the demands of our high protein society, our farmers and people who are raising these animals are pumping them full of various chemicals. So yeah, I mean, some people think that it makes young girls go into puberty sooner because they're eating all these chemicals that are added to meat. Some people think that it's causing us to get sick. Some people think that it's causing us to have bad gut health. I mean, there's lots of downstream effects from eating animals that have been pumped full of various things that are not naturally occurring or that are not a part of their natural diet. So I'm not going to go too much into that. But if you're eating a food source that is full of chemicals and pesticides and other things that are not supposed to be introduced into the food chain, then chances are good that you will be hit with something like some sort of disease or some sort of after effect of that. So I'm not going to go too much into that, but that's another reason. Why else do vegetarians live longer? Now, this is going to be a reason that you'll be like, huh? What? So eating vegetarian is actually more budget friendly than eating meat, especially if you're a person who focuses on free range, organic, locally owned kind of meat sources. Those things are not cheap. They're very expensive, even if you go into like a sharing pool with other people where you like split the cost of a pig or what have you, or you're an avid person who shops the farmer's market. Those things are very, very expensive. So you will live longer as a vegetarian because you can financially support yourself for longer because you're not throwing all your money away on a source of meat. That's right. You didn't think I was going to go there, did you? So those were some of the main reasons that vegetarians tend to live longer. The studies did say vegetarians can typically, or on average, live for about 3 more years than someone who eats meat. So if living longer and living a less toxic life is important to you, then vegetarian might be your thing, or at least transitioning to a vegetarian for a day or a vegetarian before 6 p.m. kind of lifestyle would work for you. Excuse me, I'm still recuperating from a cold. Hi, whoever's watching, I'd love to see who's watching. Can you just say hi in the comments so I can see your face or see your comments and I can speak to the questions that you may have about eating healthy without meat? Okay, so we know the reasons why going vegetarian helps you live a longer life, and that's the main reason why I went vegetarian. By the way, not to spoil anything for you, I am not vegetarian today. However, I find that it's rather my default. So for example, if I'm by myself in my house, I will most likely eat vegetarian all day long until my family comes home, and then we'll have meat for dinner. So, you know, you don't have to go all or nothing to benefit from a plant-based diet. Now, how do you go vegetarian and still do it the healthy way? I had to throw this out there because I'm sure some of you, if you've not done this yourself, a lot of girls, especially when they go through a certain stage in their teens, they might say, oh, I'm not going to eat meat and I'm going to go vegetarian. But how many of those girls are people who are eating pasta all day long, buttered noodles and cheese and what have you? That's not a healthy vegetarian lifestyle. You know, it's the vegetarian without veggies kind of lifestyle. And I personally had a lot of friends who attempted this, and it didn't work out so well because they're eating straight up simple carbs all day long, and that's not necessarily a healthy lifestyle. And myself, I didn't eat a lot of vegetables, especially green vegetables, when I was growing up, so I never was interested in going vegetarian. However, how can you go vegetarian and still do it the healthy way, right? Not default to pasta with butter and sauce, not default to spaghetti every night, not default to grilled cheese sandwiches. You know, that's not necessarily the healthiest thing you can do. First, healthy. So let's talk about healthy. When I talk about healthy with my clients, I don't ever talk about calories because it's not about calories. It is, however, about macros. So when it comes to healthy eating, my philosophy is you need to make sure you have a source of protein, a source of fat, and a source of carbs every time you sit down to eat. And you can certainly do this quite easily, in fact, on a vegetarian or even a vegan diet. So first of all, how do you eat healthy as a vegetarian? You look for healthy sources of protein. And there are millions of plant-based proteins. In fact, one of the cheapest and healthiest meals that you can do for yourself as a vegetarian is to have rice and beans, or rice and dal, which is the Indian equivalent. I eat a lot of Indian food. That is the easiest, most complete protein you can have. The way beans and lentils work, by themselves, they're not necessarily a protein source, but when you combine them with a healthy carb, then you can make them what's called a complete protein. I won't go into the science there because I don't know it off the top of my head, and I'd be happy to link out for you if you're interested in more articles on how that works. But that's the most economical and high protein based meal you can have as a vegetarian. In fact, a lot of people in the world eat this type of food on a regular, consistent basis. So combining, you know, beans and legumes with a healthy carb is a good way to get your complete protein. Now, other people might say, well, how do you eat more protein? Well, there's always eggs, there's always cheese and dairy. If you don't do like cow milk, you can do other sorts of non-dairy milks and those sorts of things. Those don't necessarily have as much protein, but you can still get the benefits of those plant-based proteins. You eat a lot of nuts. Nuts are a very important thing for you. By the way, I consider nuts to be in the fat category because ounce for ounce, they have more fat in them than they do protein. And healthy fats are an important part of a vegetarian's diet. You can also get healthy fats from seeds. You can get it from, think like a bird, right? What does a bird eat? They eat a lot of sunflower seeds, pepitas, pumpkin seeds, seeds like flax seeds, chia seeds. Those are healthy sources of fat. Lots of vegetarians and vegans especially eat these types of foods on a regular basis. So you're getting the benefit of healthy plant-based fats. You're getting the benefits of healthy plant-based proteins. And you're not eating the Franken foods like Boca and whatever else you've got in your grocery store. Now, I know there are plenty of convenience foods out there to help you become a vegetarian. I would caution you to read those food labels very carefully. Again, you can eat convenience products all day long, like the fake meats, the chicken nuggets, those sorts of things, but you don't necessarily know what's all in those ingredients. For example, one of the meatless frozen convenience foods you can get is called Quorn, Quourn, and it's basically like fungus. So, you know, I have no problem with fungi in the form of mushrooms, but I do have a problem with fungi in the form of corn, or Kjorn, I don't know how you pronounce it. So I would caution you to avoid those convenience items in the frozen section when it comes to meatless proteins, because you can get plenty of protein from your legumes, from your seeds, and that sort of thing. You can also get it from dairy. So if you're not avoiding dairy, you'll become quite familiar with different ways of preparing cheese and different ways of eating tofu or tempeh or other types of seitan. So there's a lot of soy-based proteins you can have as well. There's edamame. Some really good ones. I do ask folks who have children to go light on soy products unless it's fermented soy. Fermented soy would be things like miso and tempeh and those sorts of things. Those might be easier on your gut than non-fermented soy like tofu and can't think of what else off the top of my head. So be careful of soy, but those are also a good plant-based source of protein for you if you're going vegetarian. Another easy way to become a vegetarian. So I'm all about like ease of transition to a new lifestyle. So if you're a person who is used to your meat and potatoes kind of diet, you will sometimes have to turn to convenience foods to kind of bridge the gap for you until you can figure out how to cook more healthy vegetarian foods. And that's okay. You have full permission to do whatever you need to do to live a healthier lifestyle. Whether that includes convenience foods or includes more cooking, it'll include a combination of both at the end of the day. Some of my favorite convenience foods for vegetarian are Garden Lights, which is a vegetarian-based, like they have souffles, they have muffins that have vegetables and fruit in them. They're very yummy and tasty. My kids enjoy them. They're a little bit higher in sugar, so if you're avoiding sugars, and I would caution you on those, but Garden Lights is a good place to start. You can order online. Another one is Amy's Organics. So, you know, plant-based foods are good, but some of the foods still include pesticides and toxins and that sort of thing. Not if you eat Amy's Organics, and those are in the frozen food section. They don't add anything to those meals. No preservatives. No, it's all organic. That's a good way for you to experiment with new foods and new flavors. For example, I was not a lover of tofu when I first became vegetarian, and I tried some Amy's Organics that included, I like Asian kind of foods, so like stir fries that had tofu in them and that sort of thing. I liked tofu in those dishes. So I found different ways to enjoy tofu, even though I thought it was like gross. I would never eat a tofurkey. Yeah, the tofu turkey for Thanksgiving. I chose a lentil loaf when I was vegetarian over Thanksgiving. There are lots of things you can try. If you want to bridge the gap before you start kicking into a bunch of new recipes, Amy's Organics is a good place to go. There are some frozen food companies that offer some really healthy, organic, vegetarian-based dinners for you to try. Once you've tried and seen what you liked, like maybe you're not used to more global cuisine. A lot of global cuisines include a lot of vegetarian foods. Mediterranean foods will have falafel and hummus and olives and baba ganoush. Those things are all vegetarian. Or Indian cooking, my favorite, includes a lot of vegetarian. There's aloo gobi, which is potatoes and cauliflower. There's eggplant curry, there's egg curry, a lot of Indian dishes, which is one of the benefits of me marrying an Indian person. It's just the most delicious vegetarian cuisine in the entire universe, and not all of it has to be spicy. Like hot spicy. They're spicy in terms of fragrant, but they're not hot spicy. So I highly encourage you to try different cuisines. Some Mexican food is vegetarian. You usually see they'll use squash, they'll use beans, they'll use zucchini. You use different vegetables like peppers and onions and jalapenos and those sorts of things. So there are plenty, and they'll use cactus. I mean, if you've never tried cactus, this is a fun time for you to experiment with that. So those are my top tips for how you eat healthy as a vegetarian. We talked about finding your healthy source of protein, whether that's a complete protein, which is beans and rice, or lentils and dal and rice and that sort of thing. You can do dal and quinoa. It doesn't really matter. Quinoa is a good source of protein as well. And then you look for healthy sources of fat, which could include, nuts and seeds and things that keep you full of the good stuff. Another way to go vegetarian is to find those convenience foods that help you bridge the gap. And that could include Amy's Organics, Garden Lights, and other foods that I enjoy eating even today, even though I'm not a vegetarian anymore. So I'd like to hear from you. You've watched this video to this point, and maybe you're on the fence. You're like, oh, I don't know about this vegetarianism thing. I tried and it didn't work. Share with me your comments about your experiences with eating meatless, because there are certainly health benefits to doing so, and I'd love to hear more from you about how it's worked out for you. Thank you for joining me today about how to eat healthy without eating meat. My name is Jenn Espinosa-Goswami, and I look forward to connecting with you next week when we go over another Facebook Live for National Nutrition Month. Thank you for joining me. Take care.